maybe could contribute even a little bit of value to here in this conversation would be to talk about what it means to lead in uncertainty. And why would you think, what can I have to say about leading in uncertainty? Most of us through our Rotaract careers know what it's like to travel, and it's little things from how do I get from the airport to the hostel, and how do I get from the hostel to the gala, and all these other different questions of uncertainty. But what I wanted to talk a little bit more about was, how do you lead as a global professional in the world that we have now? And for me, there's probably 3 really big points. The first point, and when Marvi and I first started talking, we said, why don't we speak about leadership? And leadership is, for me, one of the most important topics to talk about, because for me, leadership is not how do you get people to follow you. Leadership is how do you find everything inside yourself, and how do you really deliver that to people? And keeping that in mind, the first thing that I really wanted to talk about is that when we're leading through these kinds of times, meaning uncertain times, the first thing that we need to do as Rotaractors and Rotarians, and being in the family of Rotary, and this is also even true to outside of our lives, is that we need to be creative in our leadership. And I'll give you an example. About 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, when the epidemic, or when the pandemic began, and I just kept seeing on Facebook that, Rotary meetings were being cancelled, Rotaract meetings were being cancelled. And I thought, that doesn't need to be the case. We don't need to cancel everything and then just wait for everything to get back to normal. It's never really going to get back to normal. And do we really want it to get back to normal is the other question. So then I thought, why don't we just try and show people how to go online? So one thing, obviously, that people feel, I would say, like pushback on is not because they say no, not necessarily because they're morally and principally against something. It's usually because they don't know how and don't really want to ask why. So a way to get over that is, before you introduce something new and you make it kind of rules and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, you introduce people how to do something. And so this is what we thought, okay, let's try to get on Zoom and show some Rotarians and Rotaractors what it's like to run an online meeting, how to do it, how to log on, how to do things like, log into a profile. I remember one on the first call, we had about 11 people on the first call. I said, okay, so open Zoom. And they said, how do I do that? And I thought, that's a really great question that I didn't think about. So sharing online about how to do something really gives you that connection to people about what their real questions are. So if I'm telling people online meetings are a great idea because they're fun and you can see people, but I actually haven't gone back to the first step, which is, how do I even enter an online meeting, then I've missed something, right? So coming back, having those people on the call and helping us deliver a really good user experience enabled us to bring people online. That was the first call. The second call, we had 100 people. And then on the 100 people call, Jeffrey Carteret, who's one of the Rotary International directors, says, why don't we get Mark on the next call? I was like, do you mean Rotary International President Mark Maloney? Okay. And then, and so he joined us. And then we actually had a few people join about how to use Zoom. One of the Rotarians was also from Germany, a very long time Rotaractor as well, Felix Hines. And we had over 450 people on the call. In that time, I would say it was probably in the first 10 days of really global lockdown. If we had waited for Rotary International to like stamp, yes, we're going to run an online meeting or an online webinar about how to teach Rotarians to jump online and how to run, meetings online, how to run service projects online, we probably would still be waiting. So the first thing that I really wanted to talk about was, for you in the position that you are in your club, in your district, in your life, in your job, to recognize that the solutions that we're going to require to not only get through this pandemic as Rotary, but really to get through this pandemic as people, and especially as professionals, we're really going to have to look at creative solutions. So the creative solutions will come from places you never imagined. So for example, I'm looking at this call, and I know that as much as many people have one thing that they do, maybe in their job, but you also are passionate about other things. So, I know I don't want to call out too many people, but I know that what you do in your personal life is actually something very different to what you do in your professional life. And in this next leadership phase, of the pandemic, we're going to need every single one of you to bring every single part of yourself to the table. And the reason is nobody knows how to get through this particular difficult time. If you wanted to talk about, you know, the wars, or World War I or II, all the other things that, you know, we've experienced in Europe over the last 100 years, we could look around and there'd be lots of experience. We could learn from a lot of people. But right now that's not the case, because we're dealing with a different kind of challenge, a different kind of uncertainty, and a different kind of fear. So when we keep that in mind, we're really going to have to bring our full selves to the table. So what I want you to do is to think about, in your life, what are your skills? And they're everything from, you know, I know we have some talented musicians, photographers, dancers, chefs, and that's not even what you do professionally. This is just what you do in your personal lives, you know. And I want you to think about what it is in all those different parts of your lives that you can bring to the table. Because in this next phase, every single part of you is going to be required in order to fulfill any kind of the requirements that this next phase of our world looks like. And the other thing is, after we're talking about, I want you to be creative in terms of how you serve people, and I want you to bring your whole self to the table, I want you to understand, or I want you to see that because there's no right answer, we're actually going to have to be really patient in terms of what works and what doesn't. So for example, if we were to say, okay, we're going to, you know, launch, let's take this new platform, for example, this ALEx platform. And I don't know what it is about Rotary Europe that loves male names like Eric and Alex, but let's go with it. That this is actually going to be the seeds for so many things in the future. And we're not going to know which things are going to bloom and which things are not. And this is one thing that I experience quite often in my job. So I work in innovation in Japan, which you might think is kind of like an oxymoron, two words that don't go together, but we can talk about that another day if you're interested. But what it is that what we're going to have to do is imagine that the projects that we run or the decisions that we make, we're going to have to think about them more in terms of sprints rather than in, you know, long-term, forever decisions. And this is obviously a little bit challenging in our organization when we think about something like the Council of Legislation that happens every 3 years, or the fact that we elect someone, they're here for a year. We don't have the freedom of, okay, you know, these 5-day sprints. But just because our structure is a little bit more long-term, just because our structure doesn't enable that kind of flexibility, that doesn't mean how we operate within our structure doesn't mean that we can't be equally innovative, equally as agile. And so things like, you know, with this ALExEurope initiative, let's take it and run it maybe for a month, and then maybe for 3 months, and then collect feedback either after each session or after each quarter, and then start to get an idea about what topics are people interested in and what ones, you know, people aren't. And the other and was really kind of those two topics that I wanted to talk about, because I know that I have 10 minutes and I'm reaching it now. But the first things more than ever is that I'm just seeing the kinds of people on this call, and I'm just so humbled, because each and every one of you I've either met or know the impact that you personally have had on people's lives, the impact that you've had on Rotaract. And if I think about where that's even going in the future, I just become so sure that if there's any time that we're going to lead through uncertain times, it's not only with being creative and bringing our full self to the table, it's also about understanding that the impact that we're going to make is going to look very different. We won't know the seeds that we plant. We won't know which ones will grow. But we think this is definitely the one. This is definitely going to be the one, and it won't. Maybe it's something different. Maybe it's something from that, you know, that idea that it comes from left field, or it comes from that gray zone that we take a black and a white, and somewhere in the middle, that's where the real power is. But more than anything, leading through uncertain times and difficult times is tough. It's tiring. You're going to have some really good, and I'm not even talking days. You're not going to have like a good day or a bad day. You're going to have different emotions throughout that day. You might have a good morning, and then something might happen and you know, it's not so good anymore. And then you'll feel, you know, and then you'll pick back up and then you'll drop back down again. And that's okay. And the number one way to lead through uncertain times, if we think about understanding that we have to be patient with our impact, understanding that's going to come from somewhere that we don't even understand yet, and to understand that we bring our full selves to the table, the way that we're going to lead through difficult times is with each other, because we need to lean on each other when we're feeling tired. We need to lean on each other when we're feeling that we need support. And so if there's anything that I would encourage us to take forward in leading through uncertain times, it's finding strength and finding connection in each other. So before getting on too much, that would be the number one thing, and to understand that this is exactly moments like this is exactly the things that we need to do. And it's been such, I'm really so touched and so honored to see so many known faces on this call today.